I am so sorry, Valtteri. I am so sorry what this team has done to you. Your career was not supposed to end this way. It really wasn't, but that's just how it is. The world has looked at what's to offer in the junior categories and have now said to you, I'm sorry, Mullet Man, but it's time. It's quite the achievement, isn't it? Sauber has a situation where it's both in high demand and where people could not care less about them. The only reason at present that folks even give a hoot about Sauber at the moment is that it has the only vacant seat left in Formula 1 for 2025. And at points during the season, it has been the object of at least 10 drivers' desire. There have been so many people attached to that seat, including, of course, Carlos Sainz many moons ago. However, I will admit that the battle is starting to crystallise around 2 drivers in particular, or you could argue maybe 3 or 4, but definitely 2. And one of them is certainly not Valtteri Bottas, no matter how hard he tries to go to Audi. Look guys, pick me. I like Audi. Pick me. And then the mainstream media is helping him out because Valtteri Bottas, they say, is the favourite to keep the seat. What? No, just no. You want to know something funny? I had written a whole script about this situation weeks ago, but never got around to recording it. But in the time since then, the winds of F1 have changed considerably, and now suddenly, rookies are cool again, instead of teams clinging onto their existing drivers for dear life because they're marketable assets. I almost threw up a little bit when saying that, but hey, turns out really that young drivers, they can also be marketable assets as well. And both of them come from a continent that has desperately been craving representation in Formula 1 since the days that Felipe Massa called it a day for a second time in as many years with Williams in 2017. I reckon that this battle is clearly going to make Nico Hulkenberg sweat somewhat, especially if what happened between him and Oliver Behrman in Baku is anything to go by. Did you notice how salty he was about his pace, Behrman's, and that he claimed the virtual safety car confusion cost him points, which made him finish behind Oliver? Well, Nico, I do feel sorry for the fact that the rug has been pulled from underneath your feet over at Sauber. What it is right now to what it was when you signed up for the deal just a few months ago, it's nothing like it was. The deal has been completely altered. And I think that rug is only going to get even bigger, and the pulling is going to get even more pronounced now that Franco Colapinto and Gabriele Bortoleto are the 2 main favourites to be getting that seat alongside the veteran German. Since Hulkenberg signed on the dotted line a few months ago, the entire team has changed considerably in regards to management, the pace has not improved, in fact you could say it's gotten worse, and now the new bosses are walking back their dreams of wins that Nico would have hoped would have been around for his 3rd season with them. They've got no goal anymore. It turns out now, instead of thinking that they will win in 2027 or 2028, now Binotto said, we have no set goal. We are just going to take it as it comes. And whilst I appreciate the honesty coming from Binotto and realising the situation at hand is a lot more serious than he or Audi ever thought when they acquired the team, or at least a part of it in 2022, and the dreams of Nico Hulkenberg getting a podium might remain just that. So Nico got a really bad deal considering where Haas is right now, where they are starting to find their feet, become more consistent, a solid midfield representative. And who's to say that Binotto even wants Hulkenberg? Because his contract was ironclad due to the previous CEO's top priority being Nico. Seidel's master plan was to get him to lead the team, but now Seidel is gone. You get the sense that whoever is in charge there, they inherit drivers who are not part of their plan and they don't particularly want. So therefore, they really are running low on options because, as Carlos Sainz demonstrated, if you want a really good top-tier driver from the upper echelons of the F1 grid, right now, what it is and what Audi can promise, you're not going to get that. What you can get is a midfield driver who has been down on their luck and is looking for a team to lead, and then maybe you can now look to a rookie, and considering that rookies are now popular again, you might want to try and get on that gravy train and be part of that trend. Audi is more than happy, in my honest opinion, to sacrifice this year and next year, so that means 2026 might look that little bit more competent. Sauber, it's a dead brand. No one really cares about its legacy in the Audi department. It's a shame because Sauber is such a storied name within Formula 1. It's bowing out of Formula 1 seemingly for good. This is just not the way for it to go, but that's besides the point. So with that in mind, it'll be far less pressure for any newcomer if they were to get a seat there. The time is right for Sauber to look at Brazil and Argentina seriously. Invest in the future talent that is hammering at the door of F1. Because the current Sauber drivers, they really do not and have not inspired the team to do better, have they? And whilst Zhou Guanyu has seemingly accepted his fate, that he will not be getting a full-time seat in Formula 1 next year and is instead now changed his efforts towards focusing on becoming a reserve driver with Sauber, which is probably going to be accepted because, financially speaking, it is a very wise business decision. When it comes to the likes of Bottas, there is really no good reason to keeping him because these 3 seasons, well, okay, technically 2 and a bit, he's really not been able to live up to the potential that he had when Fredvesta secured him from Mercedes with Toto's help in 2021 for 2022. He's holding out for that Audi driver and hoping against hope that the board will look kindly on 3 seasons of loyal service and hope for stability and continuity. But it's starting to look desperate at this point, and the prevailing winds in the sport are not aiding his attempts. Because even though there's been a huge amount of resistance and some not great examples of what rookies can do in Formula 1 when given the chance in the last few years, 2024 has been the exact opposite. With Colapinto and Behrman's efforts been now put on full display for all of us to see, now that Formula 1's got some attention again because there might be a championship battle and McLaren are at the top of the constructors for the first time in 10 years, people are now realizing, oh, these kids are good. In fact, they're really good. And what is Franco doing in that Williams? Whoa! Because not only are they holding their own against experienced drivers, they are actually scoring points. So they are contributing to the overall system. Because trust me, those 6 points that Oliver scored for Ferrari in Jeddah might be really crucial at the end of the season when it comes to the constructors if Ferrari have any hope of winning it or getting second from Red Bull. Because I'm pretty sure that when Carlos Sainz went down with appendicitis, when they subbed in Behrman, there were probably no expectations. They were just hoping he wouldn't crash the car. And as for Franco, what more do I need to say? He's blown expectations out of the water. Because the last time we got an F2 driver who was not in the top 5 in the championship standings was Nikita Mazepin. And that's meant that drivers like Bottas, Magnussen, and even Ricciardo, their careers are looking likely to be headed toward the exit. Their conclusions not solely based because their skills have waned since their heydays, but because they're not a draw anymore. There's no reason to keep them around. That's where things are going. And teams are now looking at what they've got and are going like, yeah, maybe it's time, Valtteri, Kevin, Daniel, sorry, nothing personal. It's just business. Because even Red Bull and Mercedes are starting to recognise this, and that they have to get Liam Lawson and Kimi Antonelli respectively in one of their machines, or else they'll be left out of sequence with the smaller teams. They'll have gotten the jump on them. Even Alpine's taking the plunge because they've got nothing left to lose, and they also want to close the chapter, the saga of Oscar Piastri, and letting him slip through their fingers because now they've got Jack Doohan, another Australian rookie and hopeful from the junior categories, as part of their academy. So they can now just tell people to shut up about it. We have honoured our academy, get over it. But the main focus of this video though is not about those other teams, it's about Sauber and the decision they need to make regarding where the next 2 years at least is headed for them. Because let's be real right now, I have got no expectations for them, and I think even they don't expect anything. So I've likened the entire situation at that team, now they've got extra money from Audi, as part of a complete home renovation. The furniture is being moved, replaced for new stuff. People are coming and going, people are changing jobs or leaving the sport altogether, and Valtteri and Zhou are just left on these chairs as this is all going on, and people are then coming around every now and again and going, "You're still here?" Remember when Valtteri Bottas got a new race engineer for Miami and he wasn't told this fact until the race weekend itself? That's a really big deal. You might not think that, oh, it's just a race engineer, what have they got to do? Look to the top drivers and their symbiotic relationship with their race engineers. GP and Max, the burgeoning relationship between Brian Bolsey and Charles Leclerc, which is paying dividends right now. Tom Stollard and Oscar Piastri, probably the most wholesome of the three. As for Valtteri, he doesn't really have that. The person who's become his race engineer now is going to be either Nico's engineer or whoever's going to be picked by Sauber in terms of a rookie. They're not really interested in what Bottas has to offer. It's become clear as day, because Bottas has not been shy about vocalizing his disappointment and frustration in not scoring points, not being able to make any progress whatsoever. Many times after the race, he has said, "We've got no pace. It's terrible. Nothing works." So he's just sort of checked out at this point. The team don't really care. 2024 is an afterthought. It's a write-off. They are not thinking about that. They're getting things in place for 2026 or next year, maybe. If you're a Bottas fan, I am really sorry. This is not how I wanted his career to end, with all of this indignant memery and just, oh, it's just so cringy. And I bet that Toto didn't want this to end this way either when he helped orchestrate the deal with Fred Vasseur and Alfa Romeo for 2022. Because when you look back to that deal and what Alfa Romeo were able to do in the first half of 2022, it looked absolutely solid that Valtteri would continue his Q3 streak. They barely hung on to 6th. So yes, you can easily blame the team for a lot of the maladies that Bottas has been facing this season, but then you got to look back to the contract that was established for Valtteri and how much he costs the team every single year. Supposedly for 2024, he is being paid $10 million as a base salary. And considering what that team is doing right now and the struggles that they are facing and how little Valtteri has actually returned in terms of points or even getting close to points, that is a major drain on the team's coffers. Because yes, you look to the 22nd that he has in the championship of 20 and think, oh my gosh, he's terrible. That's somewhat misleading though, but it is still a grave indicator that his calls for an extension are fruitless and pointless. Literally. There might have been chances for Sauber and Bottas to score early on. Even Zhou could have gotten a couple of points. I think by now, Sauber really had maybe 4 or 5 points wasted due to pit stops going awry, and then any hope of 10th or maybe a cheeky 9th being absolutely taken away from them. All of that money that is going into Bottas's bank account could have been used to help improve the team all the more, used for different purposes. Yes, I know that Valtteri does bring in a couple of sponsors, I think, but the fact is though, that money is going towards a driver, not the team itself. Nico Hulkenberg coming in, he is going to be much cheaper. They might get more out of him because they've worked together before. And he's being paid, I think, $2 million a year by Haas. So even if he gets a bump to $4 million or something, and considering that a rookie is typically paid $500,000 a year, or they sometimes get subsidies from their respective academies, considering the caliber of both Colapinto and Bortoleto, this is going to be a hugely, immensely fantastic deal. And speaking of candidates, I think there are realistically 4. McLaren Junior Gabriele Bortoleto, Sauber's current junior Teo Porcher, Mick Schumacher, and now Franco Colapinto. He's had his hat thrown into the ring with the backing of Williams and James Vowles. Now, even though Schumacher and Porcher have a remote chance of getting that seat, I want to focus on the 2 South American drivers because they tick pretty much all of the boxes as to what Sauber needs and what we Formula One fans want and need. Really need. The story of Franco Colapinto, now it's been brought to light, is such a compelling one, and his work in getting himself endeared to the Formula One fandom has been nothing short of remarkable in just 2 races. It's so mesmerizing. He's become a national hero. The country of Argentina backed him. Argentina, are going through a major economic crisis right now, where its future is looking increasingly uncertain. People there might want a sense of escapism, a hero to look to, someone in Formula One that they've not had since the days of Carlos Reutemann, back in the 80s. There have been probably 2 generations of Argentinians that have not known a good Formula One driver from their country. Now they've got one. And yes, he is accepting that his time in F1 might be short, at least for now, and that he's merely keeping Carlos's seat warm for him. But in return, Vowles is going to fight tooth and nail to convince Sauber and Audi that his academy driver is the one for them. This kind of support is immensely valuable. I wasn't entirely sure what James Vowles was going to do with Colapinto. I thought that he would have been destined for either being the Williams reserve driver for the next 2, 3, 4 years until Carlos Sainz decided that this team wasn't for him, and then he might get the call up. But no. It seems like Vowles is now willing to let Colapinto drive for a rival team, just so that means he can still be on the grid because he now recognises the impact of the Argentina driver and how much it has boosted the presence of Formula One in that continent of South America. But I'm also aware that it's not going to be easy as that. It's all well and good James saying, oh yeah, we'll ask Audi nicely if they could possibly consider Franco, but he's going to have to do more and need more than that. And pay for it through the nose. It really depends on what he can offer to the table for Sauber that McLaren or Red Bull or other places cannot. And yes, of course, Colapinto does have sponsors that can help him in his endeavours, bringing Sauber a couple of million, maybe a few million to the table to sweeten the deal, but they are getting a good thing in return, let's be honest here. But there is going to be real, serious and fierce competition when it comes to what Gabriele Bortoleto can offer, because he too has sponsors. Quite a few of them. He has the backing of Brazil. He also has the backing of McLaren, the fastest team at the moment, leading the constructors, and they also have Zach Brown, who is probably the wiliest dealer when it comes to contracts. But now Bortoleto's also got the backing of Fernando Alonso, he is extremely persuasive, he is a character, he's going to be determined as well to make sure that a junior driver of his, within his management group, gets into Formula 1, because he's realised what Mark Webber can do with Piastri, and Piastri's worked with Alonso during the Alpine days, they can relate. Fernando's going to use all of his power to help Bortoleto as well. It's going to be a very fierce battle between those two drivers. And not only that, Bortoleto might be on the cusp of doing something that Charles Leclerc did, George Russell did, Oscar Piastri did, the last one to do so, and that is getting back-to-back F3 and F2 championships. That does not happen often. McLaren are willing to let him race with a competitor if it means he can get some time in an F1 car that isn't a test session. And I also feel like they will come up with some sort of deal that if Lando Norris or Oscar Piastri leaves McLaren, then he could easily be slotted in at a moment's notice, and considering that he's only 19 years old, Gabriele, there is plenty of time for that to happen without him losing out in much of his prime time in F1. Because for the fact Audi has a connection to F1 heritage from Brazil and Ayrton Senna. Ayrton being very important in Audi's endeavours in importing their vehicles back in the 90s, because there's of course the company Senna Imports from back in the day. I think Audi even gifted a car to Ayrton Senna, and I believe he was a really big fan of it. So there is a really close connection to that kind of legacy that I think they would be milking to the ends of the earth, because hey, a Brazilian star of the future, Audi. Look at what we had with Senna. Yeah, I think Williams really needs to do the homework if they want to pull this off. One thing though that Franco does have going for him is that he has become a fan favourite in a short space of time. And we've got several more race weekends with him to demonstrate his ability when the prevailing notion would be that he would steadily improve, as well as get to show off more of his personality and what he is like as a person. He scored in his second race in a Williams. That's also not to be sniffed at. Because even though there are drivers out there who do really well in the junior categories, but they just can't quite make it in Formula 1, the reverse can also apply. That they might be okay in Formula 3, they might be good in Formula 2, but when you get them in a Formula 1 car, there's just something about it which clicks with them. And that's clearly what has happened with Colapinto. Because as I said, the FW cars, they are not easy, and he's been able to master them in a relatively short space of time. Sure, this might come back to bite me in a few races' time, where Colapinto has had a few more accidents, because, let's remember, he did have a pre-practice prang in Baku. But the fact is, though, he's gotten off to the best start possible to justify Williams even getting rid of Logan, because Franco scored 3 more points in just 2 races. That's crazy. Bortoleto does not have that luxury, though, because he is a relatively unknown quantity. Yes, I know that you watch Formula 2, and you've been able to see exactly what he can do and how consistent he has been, and how he is able to keep a level head and a calm demeanour when you've got Isaac Hadjar over here running his mouth off. And Sauber, they really need some good positive headlines right now, because this year it's been absolutely dire. There have been no positive headlines this year for that team, except for the fact that they managed to get Drake to back them at the beginning of the year. It's all been negative, and comically bad at that. Whilst I rate the hiring of Binotto, and I believe he can turn this around, like he was able to help get Ferrari back on their feet after the FIA had a word with them that resulted in that 2020 campaign, this is a far more difficult task though, and even Audi has accepted that, which does give me hope. If Audi are willing to understand and comprehend that this is not going to be an easy feat and they can't expect glory within a couple of years or so, this is a really good pragmatic decision and shows that they might be more committed than ever. They got Wheatley on board in the next year or two, that's going to help them. It's going to be a slow and steady process, but I do think that Audi will be a decent competitor by the end of the decade. Whether they're going to be winning or getting podiums though, I don't know. It depends on how well they take the regulations or the next set of regulations around 2030. But to hire a young driver and for them to be driving at Sauber, they will have far less pressure, barely any expectations considering we don't expect anything from Sauber. Unlike the likes of Behrman, due to the British tenacity and intensity from the journalists there, expecting him to be the next great Lewis Hamilton, and then Kimi Antonelli for the fact that Toto Wolff is betting the farm on this kid, thinking he's going to be the next Max Verstappen. Those two kids are going to be under heaps of tension. I really feel sorry for them. Whereas Colapinto and Bortoleto, I feel like they're going to have a much better time of it and certainly have a lot more fun. Sauber does not need 2 old hands anymore. They don't need that. They need some young blood there, along with Nico, who has been reinvigorated so much, he's practically a youngster. Keeping Bottas would be a poor choice and go against the grain of what F1 teams are doing, as well as deny 2 talented hopefuls the last seat before F1 changes again in 2026. I don't dislike Valtteri, not at all. I think he's a good guy. I think he's a lot of fun to be around. but I just don't think he is fitting where Sauber and Audi want to go. He's had his chance to do what he can for Alfa Romeo and Sauber, it's just not been enough, and the team's not been able to provide him the car that he needs. It feels like he's not been listened to, because how did Sauber get into such a mess on his watch? What's been going on? And now he's unable to do anything except drain their coffers. And I know you're probably going to be wondering when I'm going to get to Teo Porcher and Mick Schumacher. I will do that now, but I really don't see that much hope for them, considering how much backing both South American drivers have in comparison to them. Teo's had terrible fortune in finding work this year after McLaren played silly buggers with his contract, which cost a solid gig in Super Formula for this season, and he doesn't come with enough money, as he's even admitted that Sauber had to pay for most of his F2 season in 2023, which facilitated his title that year. It's a shaky foundation, but he does have skill and a decent following, and people do feel sorry for him and wish him well, but that might not be enough when you compare him to the might of what Colapinto and Bortoleto have behind them. And as for Mick Schumacher, I don't know, man. I want him to get a second chance in Formula One, but I'm willing to admit that it's going to be a struggle, and he might have had his time. He might have done. But what he's been able to do in World Endurance has been nothing short of remarkable. Him dragging that Alpine car to their first ever podium since their return to World Endurance, and that was absolutely mesmeric. Him being the fastest of those drivers, the fastest Alpine driver by a considerable margin, and also him doing it by driving in a 6-hour race more than half of it, probably close to 3.5 hours or something. That is a major feat. The Alpine team rely on Mick considerably, and that's great that he's found his niche, and that he has an affinity for sports cars like his dad did. If he can get a chance in Formula 1, then fantastic, but I don't think it's going to be for 2025. And whilst I would love for him to prove Haas wrong with Audi, and that Audi would love to have 2 German drivers on their books, that is not logical given that Colapinto and Bortoleto exist. Sauber cannot pass this opportunity up, and they should be brave to trust in rookies. Because if they did, half the grid would be doing that, and I cannot wait for it. Sorry Bottas, I just think your time is up, and I'm really sorry that the team you chose just completely fell off hard. And another team which has fallen off hard is Red Bull, in relation to last year. Should Max consider another option for the future? Perhaps one that has a direct connection to endurance racing, his other great passion? To find out why I believe Aston Martin could give him absolutely anything that he wants regarding his future in motorsport, go and watch this video next, right now, and I shall explain everything.